How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be going over the top 5 best decks for the North American International Championships. We're a few short days away from everyone gathering in Columbus, Ohio to play in arguably and likely the largest event of all time, or at least the largest event held outside of Japan. I don't know. We'll have to see exactly what the numbers are. We're still getting used to all that information. But these are the best 5 decks as they are positioned into the event. If you're trying to see success at the event, or if you just want to see what decks are happening right now, this is the video to be at. The lists, if you're watching on YouTube, are going to be available in a pinned comment. You can copy and paste those, and there are reference videos for most of the decks in this video as well. Give this video a like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what deck are you bringing to North American International Championships, or at least tell us, just say hi in the comments or something. That being said, let's jump into our number 1 pick. The Shuffle Squad is proudly sponsored by Ultimate Guard, PTCGL Store, and Atlas TCG. Check out the description below for discount codes and affiliate links to support the squad. Now it's time for the video. At our number 5 pick, we have Arceus V-Star, Giratina V-Star. Now I do want to start off that I think this is generally a placeholder top 5 spot. And what I mean by that is I think an Arc deck definitely fits into the top 5 spot. And the reason why is because we have a lot of ability-based Pokemon. So in this case, Path to the Peak is very good. That's why I went with Arctina. And of course, our large HP, Judge, Iono kind of counts really do help against Lost Zone Box. In a metagame where the best 2 decks, and I'm not trying to do any surprises, or at least the best performing decks are Gardevoir and Lost Zone variants, we do have to have some kind of counters. This is a reasonable counter to the deck. It's not always going to win, but if you Path, Judge, Iono your opponent well enough, you can do quite well when it comes to playing this deck. Maybe there's better counters out there. I've seen Rapid Strike Urshifu, Inteleon VMAX come out. This seems like a pretty solid one overall. The goal just accelerating energies with Arceus to another Arceus and or Giratina V-Star, using the barrel to make sure that you can get out of your own Judge, Iono. And we got enough tricks up here with V-Guard Energy, Path, all that stuff to make this deck really work. I think this deck's definitely a solid pick when it comes to the metagame. Not necessarily the most complex deck, but I do think if you are trying to score points at NAIC, this would be a pretty solid pick. I don't necessarily see this deck winning the event, but I do see this deck doing decently well enough in the event if you're trying to likely come out with a positive record or anything slightly higher than that. But there is a ceiling to this deck, and I think that it's a pretty low ceiling. So keep that in mind when it comes down to it, but this is a pretty solid pick if you're trying to get some points at NAIC. Coming in at number 4 is Lugia V-Star. Now, the single strike variant is the one that I put here for the sake of this video. I do think the colorless variant is also very good, and I don't entirely know where to position them. I'm only one person, or we're only one Shuffle Squad organization. There's only so much that we can do to differentiate the results between Lugia V-Star and Lugia Colorless. I think they take turns of both being very good. In this case, Lugia Single Strikes had a much better week than Lugia Colorless as far as I could tell online. And I think that Lugia V-Star is well positioned for the same reason that Arceus is. This deck does pretty good against Gardevoir, and it does pretty good against Lost Zone Box. Does it do really well against Arc decks? Do they play Duraludon or not? Did they get set up or not? I think it can be a little bit tough, and that's really where the decks that are on this list that are not the Gardevoir and the Lost Zone Box decks are really going to try to be countering those decks. So you can see Dark type Pokemon, Path to the Peak, Judge, Iono counts, large amounts of HP, single prize card attackers at sometimes. I think that this list is pretty solid overall. You're going to be using Lugia V-Star to summon Archeops into play, attack with various Pokemon. New addition to this deck is going to be Squawkabilly and Iono, and Jet Energy. Jet Energy gives you a little bit of more options when it comes to just moving from the bench to the active. I've seen some cool plays with Tyranitar there. I've also seen some cool plays with Squawkabilly to discard a couple Archeops turn 1. But again, these are consistency crutches. They're not always going to get you there. But Lugia V-Star seems to be the better deck. And the ultimate reason why I put this above colorless Lugia this deck at least has some grounding in the format. We've seen success. Regan Retzcloff itself has put this deck on the map. So he's literally seen so much success with this deck. Why would it not continue to see success in its current form? Again, if you have valid reasons to think colorless is better, I'm all here to listen to it. Let us know in the comments below. But it's one of those things where I think the single strike version is just, both of them are well positioned. This one's the placeholder for what we'll do in the video today. Splashing into number 3 is going to be Lost Zone Box Kyogre. And I mean, I think that anything in the top 3 is very blurry as well. So is anything in that kind of 4 to 8 range can change up, where it's Rapid Strike, Urshifu, Lugia, Single Strike, Lugia, Colorless, Arc, Tina, Arctura, Umbreon, like all those kinds of decks, maybe Mew as well. I think that the top 3 can very much interchange depending on how it goes, but this is the way that I have for it right now. I think Kyogre is very powerful in this format. It's not as powerful because there's not a lot of decks that have 2 prizes on the bench. Against Lost Zone Mirror, Aqua Storm is not generally the better attack, and against other decks that are relevant in the format, Lugia, sure, that's your win con. Sure, you have a win con against Arc decks sometimes, but those decks typically do pretty good against Lost Zone decks in general. So my whole thing is we have answers with this deck to a lot of decks in general. Kyogre allows you to skill gap your opponent by planning properly with Aqua Storm on the build of a turbo build of Lost Zone Box. But if you run into Lost Zone Box Mirror, you're slightly unfavored because you decide to go for Kyogre, whereas other versions might be going for cards like Trekking Shoes. That being said, I think this is a very solid build of the deck, and the goal is to use Comfey and Colress to get cards into your Lost Zone quicker than your opponent in Mirror, or just quick in general. You can attack with Cramorant by getting 4. You can power up things with 7 with Mirage Gate, and you can get 10 in the Lost Zone with Sableye. A lot of games are going to finish with Kyogre with this deck, rapidly putting energies back into your deck with Energy Recycler, Super Rod, and then using Aqua Storm to secure victories. I think this deck is really cool. Definitely one of my top considerations for NAIC. But again, that Kyogre, it's just like, it's either so good or it's so not, and that's really the fine line of where this deck exists. Jumping into our number 2 runner-up pick, we have a Gardevoir EX. Now, we have the straight-up Gardevoir EX version that's just playing very minimal techs here. The biggest tech that we probably play in this deck is Spiritomb, which is currently banned on PTCG Live due to gameplay issues. So if you have not seen those in the online lists, and you're like, hey, Zach, why do you play Spiritomb, but the lists online aren't really? I think Spiritomb is quite good in this format, and it's just not allowed to be played online because it does crash the game. We'll get into more of that on another day, or ask me in the comments and whatever. The goal of this deck is to really use Psychic Embrace to power up your Pokemon with energies that you found in your discard pile, and knock out your opponent with basically Brainwave or Storm Slash. I think those are the attacks. We have some other options too, like we can attack with Cresselia, we can attack with Gardevoir EX. But overall, this list seems very consistent, to the point. I have seen lists that play more Reversal Energy, more Psychic Energy, Luxray, all kind of in-between techs. In this case, you can just kind of draw through your deck very quickly. A couple of notable things here from this deck. I decided to cut Memory Skip routes. In most of the decks that I've played against, we're not using Memory Skip against our opponent. If you're playing against a Chen Pao deck, typically you have some kind of options already. If you are trying to use Memory Skip, that they could just retreat with Skater's Park. Really the big deck that you'd want to be using Memory Skip against would be Alolan Vulpix. You could also just use Spiritomb to play that down against a Zacian V and stop your abilities and go ahead and attack your opponent. Like, there's layers of depth when it comes to this deck, so I don't think Memory Skip is as good. The 10 HP has actually cost me more games with Cresselia and Sableye than it's actually won me games in recent experience. However, if you do feel more comfortable with a Memory Skip routes, or think that I'm just talking out of my head, by all means feel free to go for the 3-1 splits. Probably not going to change that much. Again, I think the 10 HP might matter more than the Memory Skip routes at this current point in the metagame. I'm willing to be wrong on that. I am likely not playing Gardevoir for what it's worth, but I do think it's one of those things where, in my extensive testing of this, that's where I'm at. I think that going with the 4 refinement is likely correct just due to prizing issues. I know before I've had the Mirage Step in the deck. I think that Kirlia is better as refinement. Overall, I think that this deck has a lot of options. You can see that we've gone for some interesting things when it comes to this build. But this is probably where I'd be playing Gardevoir if I were to be playing Gardevoir. And if you need to spice it up, spice it up. But I think this is probably going to be close to most lists seeing success at NAIC, and very close to a lot of the lists that are seeing success right now. What's going to be our number 1 pick? Put your best guesses in the comments below. Give this video a like if you like knowing about the metagame. We try to cover about once a week on what's going on with the metagame. Boom, here you have it. The best deck heading into NAIC looks to be Turbo Lost Zone Box. Now, Turbo Lost Zone Box looks incredibly similar to what we've seen with the Lost Zone Kyogre deck. The big difference being is that we've cut the Kyogre card some extra energies and added in things like trekking shoes. We have a Drapion. So this deck has a little bit more kind of oomph going for it. You can see that there's some more pieces to, like, more cards in this deck that might be successful. Same strategy, except we're not going to have Kyogre for end of game. We're just going to have more kind of consistency cards within this deck. Now, there are a few changes that we might want to be making. We could cut a Super Rod for a Clara to be able to get cards right back into hand. We could see a 3rd Sableye in this deck, so have more copies for Mirror so that we cannot Lost Zone them. That might be cool, but I have been liking 4 Nest Balls and double Pokestops in these decks to be able to grab them out very quickly, and especially with Super Rod putting cards back into your deck, I think your Nest Ball count should correlate with that as well by going up. Overall, I think that this deck is well positioned when it comes into the metagame because of its mirror match. So while other decks are playing Kyogre and other decks to beat the rest of the metagame, this deck is more like, hey, you want to know what? I'm going to be lean as possible. We're going to rip all the seat covers out of the back of the car. This car is going to be a little bit faster than the rest, and Turbo usually wins that race. That's not to say as a Kyogre player that you cannot win. A lot of it goes on the early turns, but this deck on average should be slightly faster than other Lost Zone Box variants. It also should have a pretty decent matchup against Pokemon like Ralts and Frigibax that are popular in the metagame, but it's one of those things where you're getting to your Sableye first most of the time. So you might be able to stop those stage 2 decks from setting up a lot of the time. There's a lot of cool things going on here, and maybe we could cut Drapion for a Spiritomb depending on how the metagame turns out. And like I said, we might cut a Super Rod for a Clara. We could add another Trekking Shoes. We could take out a Trekking Shoes for Pokegear. There's a lot of things that you could do, but in general, I think that this deck is the best deck heading into NAIC. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the deck for everyone, but I think it's the best position deck heading into NAIC. And if not, any of the decks within the top 3 can always flip-flop with each other, switching around their position on how things change up. We still have a full week of online events. Puerto Rico special events results are not 100% all the way out there yet, but we do know that at least Aiden Kuss played Aerodactyl V-Star in their Lost Zone Box deck. The finals was Lost Zone Box Mirror. Really, I think we're going to see some Lost Zone Box hate, and we're going to see a lot of Lost Zone Box at NAIC. That's not to say that there's enough hate that we're going to not see success with Lost Zone Box, but do keep in mind that there are other decks like Rapid Strike Urshifu, Inteleon VMAX that might come out of the woodwork to play in the event just because they have a pretty good Lost Zone Box matchup. Being said, this is what we got for our number 1 pick. Let me close things out. And that's what we got going on for this video today. Do you agree with this top 5? Is there a deck that you think I missed? I think this list is pretty accurate. There's a few things that might change. Like I said, Arc decks could be other Arc decks. I could see a resurgence of Arcdar Umbreon. We could see Mew hopping up there and taking number 5 spot. Like, the number 4 and number 5 spot are really where I think it gets a little bit, it can get a little bit blurry a little bit when it comes to the metagame. I think the top 3 are really defined this event, heading right into it. These decks seem like they're very well positioned. They know what they're doing. The lists are nice looking, and we'll have to see. And again, Lugia, colorless, single strike, colorless. We're still trying to figure that out. But like I said, this metagame is still a little bit new to everyone. I'm sure we'll find out at NAIC, but I think both are generally solid choices. That being said, this is Zach Lesage from the Shuffle Squad. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for other videos from the Shuffle Squad. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.